Thank you. Hey, I would like to tell you a little bit about timber. And everyone's had a piece of wood in their hand or has a wooden boat or sailed a wooden boat, but very few people know what the process is like to, for that plank to become a plank. And in my daily life, I own a sawmill and a timber company, and so I thought let's tell a story on how that works. Our speciality is spruce. We can tell lots of things about other timber species, but for me the easiest one is to tell about this one. And the spruce that we produce is used for masts and spars for boats and for deck beams and for structural items. And the reason why you choose that timber species of spruce is because it is a super light timber. It is the lightest for its weight of all commercial timber species. It basically means that it is suitable for masts, where you want lightness and strength, but also for musical instruments like a piano, where you need the resonance and the weight combined to get the volume and the sound to carry all the way to the back of the concert hall, as well as airplanes. We'll, excuse me, touch on that later. So where does it grow? Sitka spruce really grows in the entire northern hemisphere. It grows in Norway and in Ireland and in Scotland, but the soil conditions are not such that it will produce a very good tree. So the optimum area is, as you see on the chart here, in the southeast part of Alaska and the far northwest part of British Columbia, and then only along a small coastal region where you have that exact soil conditions that you're looking for. The key thing is that we need lots of water. If you have a really wet year in Finland, you probably have 1 meter of rain or 3 foot of rain. Actually, the property where we have the sawmill, in a normal year we have 12 to 14 feet of rain, and on the coast we're at 20 feet, 6 meter rain. On the mountains, and normal to get 12, 13 meters snow. It's tremendous what comes down. The last picture was just my commute to work. Anyway, here we are. This is where I spend about 1/3 of my life. It's not always like this, but it can be pretty nasty, but for the Finns this is normal too. The first part is to actually try and find a suitable tree. And since we're looking at boat lumber and high-end applications, the quality of the wood is there's super high demands, and so I need to travel along the coast. And basically, my travel starts at the Haida Islands and then all the way north to southeast Alaska, Juneau, Baranof Island. There are no roads. There are some roads, but they're dead ends, sort of. Well, as we say, you live at the end of a dead-end street in the middle of nowhere. There's, our normal way of transport. Well, it shows. If in a normal village, this is a public parking place. And actually, flying, it's not. If you charter the flights, they're expensive. But I usually just go to the post office and ask when they're flying over to Klawock, and he said, "Hey, Johnny, I'll fly tomorrow at 7." And you pay $50 and you fly. If we can't fly, then we take a boat. This is just crossing Devastation Channel on a calm day. The weather conditions are just ugly. And what the part I really enjoy about there, where if I travel in Europe, you're stuck in traffic jams, and over there I just have whales blocking my way. And this is just from an iPhone, as the boats go by. All the pictures are really iPhone pictures, and if it's not a whale, it's just a bear catching a fish. The one at the top was a grizzly who came and say hello, and I had the window of the car open. I don't know how good idea that was, but I'm here. And sometimes, and this is not timber related, but I just have to go places, and this was a day where I said to the pilot, hey, we're really, really close to the Mendenhall ice field, which is an ice field where the ice is 600 meters, almost 2,000 foot deep. And the NASA used it to train the astronauts for the landing on the moon, because they figured it was the climate on Earth closest to the climate and the conditions on the moon. And normally you just can't land there. It's too bad. But I was just lucky. We were there. Beautiful day. I asked the pilot, "Hey, can we land?" He says, "Johnny, let's try." And I spent a day there, and it phenomenal. Sorry, that was nothing timber and boat related, but. Okay, so we're still looking for a tree. This is our travel as we fly over. Finally, we get to an area where the Forest Service, because it's all government controlled, they basically feel that that's a hopeful area. And from there on, we hike by foot and inspect the trees. One of the things that is super critical nowadays, and rightly so, is environment. We can fill a whole symposium about that, but we need to look at the environment, and there are studies on before anything happens. We have environmental impact studies where you look at the deer and the salmon habitat and erosion of soil and how do you restore it. To give you a little idea on time frame, first time I actually visit an area until all the permits are there. It's pretty normal. If it goes quick, it's 2.5 years. It can be up to 5 years from the moment of allocation of an area where there are hopeful trees until there is a chance to harvest them. 2.5 to 5 years. So you need to be patient. My job is primarily just looking at areas. I look at soil conditions. I look at exposure to weather. On which side of the mountain are we? What are the prevailing winds? Do these trees have a chance to grow old without developing tensions? We take core samples out of the tree. It's well, 1/3 of my life I spend out there just trying to figure out what would be suitable wood for or suitable trees for masts and spars and high-end applications. This is just a short example of what happens on the environmental side. After there is a harvest, obviously there's been roads built for the logging trucks, bridges, they all have to be removed. The bridges are removed and literally taken off site. The roads are being sown in with grass. The Forest Service comes by, inspects it all, and even if there's a little plastic bag, they'll charge you for it. Well, they won't charge you. You pay for the helicopter that has the forest inspector, and if he sees a little sandwich bag over there, he says, just put it down and stay an hour there, and it teaches the guys really quick. So, and once that's done, the next stage is planting, of course. This is a Dutch company, Brinkman, who we work with a lot. They're the largest, they were one of the first, and they're now the largest tree planting company in the world. They've planted over 1.5 billion trees. Fascinating company. If anybody wants to have a look at what they do, I'll put the website up. Staying in line here, we don't have roads, so somehow you need to move these trees from the forest to the nearest port, and the only way to move them is over water. So really, you make bundles. Those bundles are dropped in the water, as you see here, and then these bundles are then collected. Towboats are hired, tugboats, and they bring these rafts along the coast. Short trips are 2 or 3 days, and long trips can be up to a week. And then hopefully the weather doesn't turn foul. You can't, like the speed with a raft is 2.5, 3 knots, so it's slow going, and you're in the Pacific, big waves. Yeah. Okay, here we are on land. The logs are out, the final inspection comes, and our job then is to look at each individual tree and look at what we call indicators. So you look in the bark, and when you see the little circle, that's where there was a branch. That branch translates into a knot, and that knot, basically makes that you don't want a mast out of that material. So that's an enormous protocol for us to figure out how we actually need to position those logs, if we should buy them at all, and what we do with them. Based on what we have seen and all the specifications, you orient the log on that carriage which drives through. And here's our next little challenge. And this is something that you all need to deal with, is wood is an anisotropic material. Now, I thought I had an idea to show what that is for the people who may not know. Oops, hang on. So what anisotropic means is that in each direction it has different properties. So if this would be a piece of aluminium and I would try to bend it, it would be nice and stiff in each direction. It really doesn't matter. If this is aluminium, if I cut a strip out in this direction, that direction, that direction, it's all the same. Same shrinkage, same swelling, same strength, and just for the fun of it, to try and illustrate it, I cut two pieces out of here. One where it's nicely in the length, and one transverse where really that's all you need to do. That's anisotropic behavior, not only in strength, but it's also in the way that sound moves through wood. So like on a grand piano there, we actually use that sound travels 3 times as fast along the grain as across the grain. When it comes to shrinkage and swelling through moisture, same effect or even more dramatic. Here you can see, for instance, just the effect that I was just showing where, you know, how on earth is it possible if this is under 45 degree. If your grain drops off 15 degrees, you lose half the strength of the piece of wood. It's dramatic. So with everything you do when you try to find a good piece of wood to build something that needs to be resistant to force, you look at how is that grain orientated, the annual growth rings. You can do it visually, which just about everybody does. I was deeply involved in developing X-ray and part of the group at the Institute of Applied Scientific Research that developed it in Delft, and that was a project of 20 years, but that did become the industry standard and was patented and built 300 times, and so we use X-ray to find out what the orientation is of the grain and what the effect is of the strength. The other one you can do, as I just said, if I know that my sound travels 1/3 of the speed crosswise as along the grain, then all I need to do is measure the speed of my frequency through the wood and I can calculate the strength. That's what we do every day at the mill. And based on that data, you then orient, how do you cut a log? So the normal way, if you buy a piece of wood, people just take the cylinder and cut it through and through, and that's it. 99.99999% of all the wood in the world is cut like that. And what you do is you basically miss the chance to optimize the strength. It's almost like if you're building a bridge out of concrete and you don't really care in what direction the reinforcement is. You just throw some iron in and Bob's your uncle and hope all is fine. If you try to do it right, then try and orient the grain exactly in the direction you want, not only for strength, but also for shrinkage. And that's what they call quarter sawing. And with quarter sawing, we use every possible, we use every possible idea and technology there is to optimize the strength of a piece of wood. All right. So that was the theory. Let's cut some wood. This is the reality. So here's a bandsaw. It has like 200 horsepower. The blade is about 45 foot long, and that's how it's been sawn. Here's yours truly in front of the log. We have prepared it. We looked at it with all the knowledge and ideas that we have. We draw it up and say, this is how we're going to cut the log. And then you get the opening cut, and that's your moment of truth. And there is no second chance. And it's honestly, it is like you know, cutting a diamond. If you go to Antwerp or Amsterdam, where they have, you know, they cleave the diamonds, that first cut tells you everything. There is no way back. If we make a mistake, you basically reduce the value of that log or that tree with, goes down to 50 to 70%. It's dramatic. Well. In this case, it went all right. Here's the next stage. Now you're actually using that same bandsaw to cut boards. This is a cool project. I don't know how many of you follow Leo Goulden and Tally Ho. Does that ring a bell? If it doesn't, yeah, I've got one hand. That's not enough. It's getting better. Leo, I'll flip just through. I got a call from Paul Goss, who's a captain on Addicts, and he says, hey, my bosun has bought an old boat. He might need a hand with some timbers. He didn't need my help. He figured out that he made a YouTube video of the wreck that he bought. It went viral, and he is now almost ready to launch. And he's built a community of wooden boat lovers and enthusiasts and people who follow the project. I just checked, 483,000 people check his videos every week or every 2 weeks. We'll put that up if any one of you is not following it. It is fantastic. So the man needs support, and go and have a look. Anyway, just what you just saw there is as the wood comes off the machine, we need to move it. We do that with vacuum. We can lift roughly 1 ton using vacuum. And as we work our way through the log, those decisions that we were talking about, the grain, come back all the time. And we have this little committee that keeps on trying to figure out and make the right decision. Here you can see again that this is one of the reasons why we can't work in the winter. You need to cool the saw blades. The temperature is so high that that bit of water that runs through there comes out on the other side boiling. If you do it in the winter, everything freezes up, and we have minus 25, minus 40 sometimes. Not pleasant. Good. And as you saw the little sketch that I made, you work your way down the log, and each time you keep on turning and looking for grain, and how do you work it out, and this is the final stage. You have those quarters, and now you're finished with the tree. And then once you have sawn the tree to boards, then you still have, there's a piece of bark on, and there's on the other side there is hard defects, and those need to be cut out. And these are all boards which are 40 foot long. Yeah, and it's a hard work. Let's see if it goes in. No, there you go. Here you can see that's the final stage of at least what happens in Canada. Next one, from there on, you need to dry the wood. There's moisture in, so you do air stacking. There's little sticks that go in between. The natural drying for a couple of months. And once that has happened, it goes on a truck. American trucks, of course. Goes down to Vancouver, which, to give an idea of where we are, it's about 1,500 kilometer over road to get to Vancouver, and it's just straight south. Well, now we have a piece of wood, and that piece of wood needs to be remanufactured into something you can use on a boat. It's got all the different qualities and different dimensions, and that's what happens in the mill in Holland. So it's being optimized and dried and planed and worked out to a semi-finished product. This, for instance, is actually for those pianos. That's the main thing that we do. That's sort of the water that at least my company floats on. Is we build or we produce the wood for grand pianos. And that's about 3/4 of what we do, and about 1/3 of all the pianos or at least 1/3 of the pianos in concert halls around the world have a soundboard that comes from this mill. Here's Joep. So this is just part of the work that happens in Holland. It takes a long time if you think about it. The first time I looked at the tree that Joep is cutting there now, that was from the if it goes really fast, it would be, including logistics, 3 years, 4 years. Sometimes, it takes 5 years from the moment that we actually find the tree, purchase it, until it is being shipped out. Here's a few examples of what happens with it. This is a 12-meter mast being built for Nini Anker. Part of what we do in the mill in Holland is we actually cut the staves and work with naval architects and so forth. Somebody copied that one. Here's sounding boards for the grand pianos, like you see over there. Here's a cool project. This was Elena, which is a 2-mast schooner, Herreshoff schooner, where a Dutch company, Ventis, they built all the spars for it, which was volume-wise. That's been by far the largest project for anyone involved. Spectacularly beautiful boat. Here was a Beatrice Aurora, of course. If you don't love that boat, then go and see the doctor. She's beautiful, just fantastic. So that was built in Stockholm, the new spars for that. Here's some, that's Bobcat. She was restored at Cantiera Naval d'Argentario by Federico Nardi, and it's Dougie Peterson at the helm there. So there's a variety. I'm just really lucky with those projects. This is like anyone who doesn't know this, promise me, Google it tonight, look at YouTube, have a look at it, support it, like it. It's important. You'll see why. Good, and if it isn't boats, just to wrap that up, it's guitars. This man plays with guitars built from the wood that we produce for him. Airplanes. That's a very important part of it. This is a de Havilland Mosquito, which was a plane that was developed in World War II. Mr. de Havilland had a great idea. He said, listen, all these planes are built in steel or in aluminium. We don't have enough, let's build it in wood. And he came up with the idea, built a prototype in 1943, and then built 7,000 of them in the coming 3 years. And I think that helped in the World War II. There's only 4 of them in the world that are flying, I have the bragging rights of being the only one that has the approval from the civil aviation authorities to supply the wood for these highly loaded planes. Just to put it in perspective, that wing the guys are building up, that's 5,000 horsepower hanging off a wooden structure. Rolls-Royce Merlin engines, 2 times 2,500 horsepower, and there's just 4 bolts of steel and the rest is wood. Very, very complicated and highly loaded. For that, there's only way that you can do that if you have your own lab, so you need to test for actual compression and E-modulus and what have you. So, yeah. Well, we're almost there. These are my friends in Canada, and they all say hello. And that was my bit for today. Thank you very much for your attention.